Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone. My name is Rosnani Binti Azman and I'm the second presenter. Today I will talk about best practices. I hope you guys can understand and learn with me. Okay, now we will proceed to the next slide. Best practices in education. Okay, what do you guys know about best practices? Best practices is the teaching strategies teachers use daily begin as innovative ideas that were tested and then perfected by their creators. This suggests that the definition for best practice can be interpreted as existing teaching practice that have been proven to be effective. Okay, how? So what are some of the best practices in education? The strategies and practice can vary depending on the age group and the ability of student. But some general best practices that are used by teachers today include 8 best practices that I will explain later on. 8 best practices in education. Okay, the first one is demonstrate instructional balance in learning. I will explain more further to you guys, which is balance in literacy instruction involve integrating direct skill and strategy instruction with authentic reading and writing text and tasks throughout the day. According to Carlisle and Rice, effective teachers provide rational, well-crafted lesson, modeling, and demonstration before actively involving students in practice and application opportunities. For the example, the teachers announce the lesson focus and discuss when or why it is important. The next one, the teachers model and demonstrate the skill or strategies. And the last one, the student independently apply the skill or strategies to text. Okay, now we will go to the second best practices, which is involve students in high density reading and writing instruction, which means best practice in literacy instruction focus on devoting more of the school days to reading and writing, including a dedicated literacy block and application to all curriculum areas, so students connect lesson to real-world experience. Instruction is meaningful, purposeful, clear, and concise, as teachers previously taught skills and strategies into new lesson. Using best practice technique, teachers are also able to integrate numerous goals into single lessons. For the example, how a previously taught lesson revisit in new reading and writing instruction. Okay, the next one. What is an example of the lesson that addresses several reading and writing goals? Okay, the last one. What options are available for integrating more reading and writing instruction into the school day? Third best practices. Provide effective scaffolding for student learning, which is best practice require teacher to support students with concentrate instructional assistance when needed, allowing each individual to experience success in learning. Scaffolding include mini lesson, individual coaching, and open-ended questions team. Student progress and move ahead with the correct amount of scaffolding accompanied by a gradual release of responsibility as follows. The teacher is responsible for a selected task. The teacher shares responsibility for the task with student. Student take responsibility for the task with teacher support. Student assume responsibility for applying the task to a new situation. For the example, how do you make time for small group mini lesson and individual coaching in your daily schedule? And how can you move your students toward more responsibility in their learning? Okay, now we will go to the fourth best practices. Produce self-directed learners. Means teacher using best practice enable students to become self-directed in their learning. Through modeling and demonstration, teachers show students how to become problem solver. Through guided practice, teacher help students learn to select the appropriate problem-solving strategy for the appropriate equation. Once students can self-regulate problem-solving behavior, they are able to continue to learn and progress on their own. For the example, in what way are your students involved in self-directed learning? How have you modeled or demonstrate problem solving within a particular lesson? And what problem-solving strategies have you observed students using during guided practice? And lastly, when have you observed a student transferring learning problem-solving behaviors to a new situation? In what ways did he or she achieve success in this situation? Fifth best practices. Maintain effective classroom management. Effective classroom management is one of the most visible examples of best practice. Organize time, classroom environment, and space for literacy needs. Also implement structure and routine for productive learning experience and provide a combination of whole group and small group instruction. Next, utilize pair activities, team project, and independent work or select appropriate material for effective lesson. Lastly, you can collaborate with students and in-class support staff and share responsibility and choice with students. For the example, what classroom grouping are available for your students? Where and how do you find needed material for lesson? What does collaboration look like in your classroom? Lastly, how do you support a classroom community of learners who maintain a mutual respect for one another? Okay, for the six best practices. Teach with high expectation that all students will learn. Means displaying confidence in student ability has positive effects on their behavior and academic achievement. Best practice include teacher expectation that all students will learn. With high expectation, appropriate scaffolding, or the ability to motivate, teacher encourage all students to believe in themselves and reach their potential. Expectation correlate with self-esteem in students, which carries over into their literacy learning. For the example, in what way do you work to motivate students of all levels, and how is this reflected in your lesson design? Next, how can teachers display confidence in students in non-verbal ways? Okay, and how students encouraged to meet their potential? Lastly, what is one particular experience you remember when your high expectation helped a student success? 7 best practices. Know and state the purpose for all literacy experiences, which is effective teachers have extensive background knowledge and a well-developed belief system about literacy learning and are familiar with mandate district curriculum and state standards. Since best practice include understanding the purpose of literacy experiences, teachers clearly inform students of the rationale for each lesson. Teachers pull from a variety of literacy perspective and teaching technique that support students in all content areas and make a clear connection between reading and writing experiences and the real world. For the example, how do you make students aware of the rationale for each lesson? Next, how do students use reading and writing to learn in the content area? Lastly, how will your student explain the importance of reading and writing in the world outside of school? Okay, now we will go to the 8 best practices, the last best practices, which is interact in the classroom as students model, coach, and mentor, which means best practice is characterized by an instructional approach based on modeling, demonstration, and mentoring as opposed to telling or giving information to others. Teachers give students opportunities to become problem solvers who take responsibility for their own thinking. As teachers shift their practice toward a coaching model of interaction, they engage students in high-level questioning and responding through the use of active learning strategies. For the example, how is learning affected when students perceive teachers as coaches or mentors? Next, how students ask to take responsibility for their own thinkings. And the last one, how can purposeful questioning influence the outcome of the lesson? There are many classroom management issues out there and I picked two, which is disruptive talking and starting class. Okay, for the first issue, disruptive talking. The problem when students talk during teachers' direct instruction. It is a distraction and it is disrespectful. For that reason, this is often the issue that frustrated educators the most. It is nearly impossible to prevent students from talking, but there are some strategies that work more effectively than others when addressing this dilemma. The solution is make eye contact with them. It is harder for students to continue talking at an opportune time if they know you are onto them. Also, invite them into the lesson. When one of your students doesn't respond to the eye contact method, you can use their name and ask them a purposeful question. For the example, Nani, have you written a paper like this before? Can you tell me what your favorite or less favorite part was? I don't try to trick them or embrace them by asking a question I know they can't answer. I just subtly let them know where I want their attention. Okay, we go to the second issues, starting class. The problem is beginning of class procedure are essential. Without a consistent routine and enforced expectation, students won't be in their seat when the bell rings. And they might grow to expect at least 2 minutes of socializing time at the beginning of every class period. Okay, the solution is at the beginning of the year, make it crystal clear that you expect them to not only be seated, but also working on the bell ringer for the day when the bell rings. In your class, it is daily independent reading time. Every period, your students know that they need to have their books open and already be reading them when the bell sounds. To encourage this behavior, you can model it. You sit on your chair at the front of the room, greet students as they enter, and let them observe you reading your novel. Sometimes you can take your novel to the door and read as students enter, a visual reminder of what they should be doing immediately. Also, as an extra incentive, you can give students 1 point participation grade each day. Either they are engaged in bell ringer activity without being reminded or they are not.